Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, technical agronomist with Cooperative Farmers Elevator. And in this week's Field Friday segment, I thought I'd probably touch on again, we continue with this drought stress, lack of rain in most of the area. I thought we'd just kind of talk about what's going on, what that could possibly mean as far as impact on productivity and so on, just kind of what we maybe think we know and what obviously a lot of things we don't know. But obviously we've been through an awful lot. You look at the weather archives here, we're one of the driest and hottest Junes on record. Maybe isn't changing anytime soon. Every time it looks like we have a little bit of a chance of rain. If we do, it's a very narrow band and it just misses a lot of our area. The heat kind of seems like it keeps wanting to come. We've had an awful lot of 90-some degree days, and you can see the impact on the crop as we drive around. I'm actually out here in the field. This actually looks really nice, probably has some of the least impact. This is actually one of our plots. Actually looks really good for where it's at, but I didn't want to stand out in a field that looks like an onion. But we should talk about what this could possibly mean for what we're looking at. It's really hard to put a number on, so what's the yield impact of weather like we've had on this crop that's rolling up, and we've seen a lot of this corn kind of roll up pretty tight in the afternoon sometimes. You can find some data that says somewhere in that 5% range. If we get corn rolling up 4 consecutive days, maybe like a 5% yield impact. But that's going to vary a lot. You can drive around in the country and see a lot of variation. Some fields are rolling up, some aren't. Some roll up by 10 o'clock in the morning, some maybe for a couple hours in the afternoon. So I mean, it's hard to quantify and it's hard to ever research something like that, but we know it's probably taking some of the top end off. But I'd rather be hot and dry and have this corn struggle today here in June, a couple weeks before tasseling, 2-3 weeks before tasseling, as opposed to during tasseling and thereafter. We're getting to that stage now though, where the most important period of that corn cycle is a couple weeks before tasseling and a couple weeks after that early grain fill period. We can have some really tough weather, but if we get good weather around that period of time where we cool off a little bit, we get some moisture, we can still have a really good crop yet. We're entering that phase where we're going to need this weather pattern to change, but it's all not for loss yet. We still have a lot of potential. This corn rolling up, we've talked about where you drive by some of these, especially in light sand spots, they're probably scorched enough or they're probably hurt, but when this corn's rolling up, obviously it's doing that to protect itself. That's Mother Nature's way of kind of holding that leaf together, trying not to lose any more moisture, sweat off any more moisture, transpire any more than it has to. That's good in the protection of that corn, but what it isn't doing is when it's rolling up, it's not capturing sunlight energy and using it for productivity. So that's where we're losing some yield potential every day it does that, and the longer it does that, the worse we're at. This corn here, we're probably at about a V9, getting some V10 plants in here. So we're entering up into that period where we're going to start looking towards tasseling here in a few weeks, and we're going to start to need things to get better. But before we think it's all farming for crop insurance and we're in a lot of trouble, we still have a lot of potential left on a lot of these fields, especially if they're not rolling up all day long. We just need the weather to change and improve our rain potentials. Soybeans, some of the impacts on soybeans, you can see now some of the fields are really starting to take off, some aren't. Again, that's the same thing as we see in corn. Some fields are just in a better shape for various reasons. And it's hard to pinpoint one thing. The fields that are struggling, the ones that aren't, other than soil type, the obvious ones. But the things you'll read about soybeans under drought stress during the vegetative stage, which we're ending now, we're kind of getting into the, we're starting to see flowers on these beans. But what we've been through, beans don't put on as much top growth. They'll develop, less top growth, less trifoliates, and less size to them. But they're putting more energy into sending roots deeper to find moisture and to keep it happy. So that may be better as we go forward. We're probably losing some of the nodes and the flower bearing nodes on the early side of things here as that plant struggles. You see those beans, corn rolls up as a reaction to stress. Soybeans will turn their leaves upside down, and that's kind of the way, we've all seen it. That's their reaction to stress. The same thing applies. They're not as efficient at capturing sunlight and creating dry matter growth when they're doing that, but that's just, nothing we can do about it. But So the root growth is going more energy towards it growing down. That might be better for us later. I am concerned on some of these fields on 30-inch rows. Are we going to get to canopy this year or not? But we've all seen it before too. Beans, that generally that ball game is in July, late July and August. If we get rain during that period, they can look really rough up until that point and still can have tremendous yields. So there's a lot to be determined on the corn and the soybeans as far as yield potential yet. Obviously we're clicking forward every day towards more and more critical times to come. We've seen soybeans bloom earlier than normal. That is another reaction to stress. They will bloom earlier. We planted earlier, which also will drive them to flower early. But so we're getting to that point where it's starting to get really critical that we start improving here. But again, we're not to the throw in the towel stage. I am concerned going forward here if we don't start changing our weather pattern. This kind of condition is where spider mites come to become an issue on corn and soybeans. If that starts to be more prevalent, I can find them, but they're not real prevalent just yet. As I find some issues with those, I'll probably do another video on that and talk more about it. But keep an eye open on your crop edges, corn soybean lines along brome grass ditches and terraces. They seem to work in from the edges. If you see corn yellowing there, that may be something to consider. But with that, that's this week's Field Friday segment, and we'll see you next week.